Coming to you from the Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. We just got the news that everyone anticipated, nobody wanted. It's a massive bummer. Joe Burrow is going to be out for a minimum of 3 months with a turf toe injury, which might not sound like much. I think turf toe needs a rebrand to like Satan's toe or something like that because it is one of the most painful injuries to play through as an athlete, and most of the time you can't play through it. Joe Burrow, I think, has a grade 3 sprain, which will require surgery. Now, to start on a bit of a positive note, because this is obviously not a real happy-go-lucky kind of episode, I think the Bengals actually will be able to stay afloat with Jake Browning. Now, Joe Burrow is more than likely out for the season, but if he gets back in 3 months, late December, and the Bengals are, around 500, I think that's absolutely on the board. I mean, their schedule isn't a cakewalk, but it's not a gauntlet either. They got the Vikings next week, then the Broncos, and then the Lions, the Packers, the Steelers, the Jets. Like, two of those games are really tough, obviously. I think four of those games are very winnable, and I saw enough from Jake Browning, despite the three interceptions, obviously, that I think he can get the ball to Chase and Higgins enough to keep the offense afloat, and a lot more pressure is going to go towards that defense, which I still think is well below average. But that's besides the point. Obviously, the story here is about Joe Burrow, and I've already seen a lot of criticism come in on the Bengals and how they've been really, really inadequate at being able to protect their biggest asset as a franchise. And I think a lot of it is well deserved. I have been very, very critical over the years of how the Bengals have approached off seasons from a free agency perspective, how they wait forever to re-sign players to pay them at their most expensive, kind of like the Cowboys do. Their O-line is bad this year. There is no doubt about it. I called it before the season that was my biggest concern for their team. I thought that their defense would obviously not be great, but be slightly improved. It couldn't get worse, but their offensive line got worse. And people didn't really talk about it that much because, again, the defense was such a big story. It's bad this year, and it's clearly resulted in disaster for the Bengals so far. But this is not a one-way street. There is a player involved in this who has some accountability in his own IR-ness at this point. I know that's not an adjective, but I'm using it as one. There are three things about Joe Burrow that I think are kind of going under the radar right now. And to preface, he's obviously awesome, but he's made a couple of errors on the field, off the field, and an error that he didn't make at all, but it's just kind of a matter of fact. The first thing that happened this offseason was him and Jamar Chase publicly advocated for the Bengals to re-sign T. Higgins. It really forced the Bengals' hand because if they had let him go, then the story would have been, Joe Burrow has no influence. They don't listen to their players. The Bengals are doing Bengals things again, letting a good player walk. Realistically, they should have spent that capital on defense, the offensive line, or literally anything, in my opinion, outside of that receiver room. When you have a quarterback as good as Joe Burrow, you're supposed to elevate your weapons around you. Look at what Mahomes is working with right now and worked with during two of his Super Bowl runs. Juju Smith-Schuster was his best receiver on one of those Super Bowl teams. Tom Brady, during his Super Bowl runs, was throwing to Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola primarily. I could go on. A quarterback should have one really, really solid weapon. Brady had Gronk. Mahomes has Kelsey. Joe Burrow has Jamar Chase. You don't need T. Higgins on top of that for an explosive offense, in my opinion. But Joe wanted him because Joe Burrow's play style is play out of the shotgun, hold the ball for as long as you can to give those receivers time to develop down the field and push the ball. And it's an incredibly exciting style. It's obviously an incredibly effective style for Burrow, considering if the Bengals just won a few more games, I have no doubt that he probably would have won MVP last season. But he plays within the pocket almost exclusively. He holds onto the ball for a very long time. And with that, you're going to take a lot of blindside hits that you can't see. That's just the NFL. And he has been hit the most times out of any quarterback since he's entered the league. In the Bengals' defense, though, it's not like they haven't tried to address this. They have ranked top third in the league in cap dollars dedicated to their offensive line since 2022. It's not like they're allocating their funds to, not protecting Joe Burrow. I didn't quite state that eloquently enough, but they're putting resources into the offensive line. A, they're just not very good at it. And B, again, the way that Burrow plays, it is going to put a lot more stress on that offensive line than a normal quarterback typically would. And for these two most recent injuries that he's had that have kept him out for an extended period of time, it wasn't like his first injury where he just got blown up, his knee went out. You can obviously blame protection for that. They have been two really weird, almost non-contact, take a wrong step kind of injuries. First of all, 2 years ago, he had a wrist injury that had never been seen on a quarterback before. Do you guys remember this? He had to consult baseball teams to kind of get an understanding of how the rehab process could go because it was just so unusual for a quarterback to have that kind of injury to his wrist. And now he has a toe injury that is more common, but it's rare to be this severe that it keeps you out for 3 months, which again is pretty much the entirety of your season. Joe Burrow, and this blew my mind when I looked it up, but it's true. Joe Burrow turns 30 years old next year. I know that sounds weird because he was only drafted 4 or 5 years ago. I think 5 years ago now. But he was an older player coming out of college. Remember, he didn't play any games at Ohio State, had to transfer out of there, played a year at LSU, wasn't very good, and then had that last year at LSU where he played the best college football we've ever seen ever. But 30-year-olds don't typically get healthier when they hit that 3-decade mark. Like, typically, you go the other way. Now, I'm not saying Joe Burrow is out of his prime by any means, but the older you are, the more hurt you get. And Burrow so far has shown that he's not exactly the body type to handle consistent NFL football hits, pressure, whatever you want to call it. Throwing the football again with the wrist injury. Like, we've just never seen something like that before. So, with that, people are using Andrew Luck comparisons. And I understand that. You put Joe Burrow's amount sacked and times hit and pressure rate and all that stuff and put it against Luck's, who, for people who don't remember, was just like Burrow coming out of college, except heightened times 10. He was the biggest can't miss prospect probably since John Elway. And the Colts just weren't able to put an offensive line in front of him. And he had to retire after 6 seasons because of the tax that it's took on his body. And again, I understand those comparisons, but I really don't think that's the kind of injuries that Joe Burrow is going through. It's not consistent getting hit so hard your shoulder pops out or taking shots to the legs. Again, it's these freaky little turf toe wrist fracture injuries that show that he's just might not be the body type to sustain a long NFL career. A better comparison in my mind is Kawhi Leonard, who at his healthiest and best, obviously might have been the best player in basketball, especially in that 2017 to 2019 area. You could argue that there was nobody better. There was definitely nobody better two-way on the court than Kawhi was, but just little knee injury here, a shoulder injury there, his Achilles is, you know what I mean? Like, there's always something going on with Kawhi Leonard that makes it so he's not able to consistently produce at the level that we know he can produce at. I worry that's the path that Joe Burrow is going down, because you look at his body of work, 3 out of 6 years, he is missing significant portions of the season. And again, it's not like he's running around like Josh Allen, putting shoulders down and taking hits. He's just sitting in that pocket, and he's consistently out long term. And that can't happen when the Bengals' entire hopes and dreams rely on their passing offense. And listen, again, I think Jake Browning's going to be fine, but he is not Joe Burrow. This sucks, and I hate that this is the conclusion that I have to come to, but Joe Burrow and Kawhi Leonard are looking more like one and the same than I would have ever suspected even a couple of years ago. And it sucks because Burrow is awesome to watch. I think the Bengals will be able to stay afloat. What do you guys think is going to happen to the Bengals this season? Will they sneak into the playoffs? Let me know in the comments below. I'm small enough as to where I read all comments. Love doing it. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard. Please subscribe if you really enjoyed it. The Spit Sports Show just hit over 400 subscribers. Big things happening on this channel. As always, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out. I love you guys.